I'd heard of the award, for several years running, and of course I'd seen that Ron Rash, a very favorite writer of mine, a very good writer, had won the novella some years back. So I think I'd actually submitted Cal maybe a couple of years back. I had not heard anything. Actually, I had forgotten that I had resubmitted it, to tell you the truth, and was quite surprised when Amy Rogers called out, really literally out of the blue as far as I was concerned, and said, guess what? I'd come across this Watauga County guidebook. My grandfather actually did have a farm up in Watauga County, and I found this history and looked up his particular community, and there was this little tidbit that there was these two guys that took a cow and started walking across the country, and that always stuck with me. And so about 10 years ago, I actually started writing this. It was the third novel I'd tried. I'd sort of hit a wall with the previous two novels and wanted to go back to some more personal material, and the cow sort of took off. It was interesting. I do remember I had a hard drive crash, and I actually lost the first 80 pages of this novel completely.
Oh,
it was all gone, no backups or anything. So at that point you sort of think, the literary gods are against you. Maybe it's time to quit this foolishness. But I did take up the foolishness again, and actually I started writing it again in longhand, and wrote most of the novel in longhand, and then put it back on a computer. So I probably finished this novel up maybe about 5 years. And I particularly wanted to have a grandfather, a man who talked a lot and could spin these tall tales. And I was just very interested, really, in making a story about storytelling. This wasn't just going to be a tall tale, but I wanted to sort of marry it to, how do tall tales actually relate to real life, and how much of our real life turns into tall tales. So it becomes more about myth and journeys. Usually I write early in the mornings before I go to work, but I do write in snatches and such. I've always found that it's very much almost a left brain, right brain sort of thing. It's very two different dimensions, or in some ways I think writing journalism is like, not be simplistic, but like playing checkers, versus writing fiction is more of chess problems and such. What I like about fiction is that you make things up. You're able to get out of yourself and into a character's head. As a journalist, that's just verboten. You're not a mind reader. There's no way that you can say that I know what someone is thinking or actually write that. The nice thing about journalism is you don't make up the facts. I mean, they're always there if you can go find them. So you don't have to rack your brains or imagine or whatever. The facts are out there. What is difficult, I think, about journalism to understand is that how very few stories there are in journalism. I'm talking about stories in that, the sense, that Aristotle said, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. With journalism on a daily basis, you're sort of just reaching out there and cutting out a slice of life, because that story keeps going on, and doesn't necessarily have a neat ending. And that's the nice thing about fiction and novels. It does give us that illusion of an ending. And with an ending, I think human beings find meaning. That's why we like stories. So people keep asking me, what's it like to work in a dying industry? And you're never quite sure if they're referring to journalism or referring to writing novels or whatever. And I believe that neither one of them is dying in that sense. Because what makes human beings human is storytelling. We've always told stories. In the mid '80s, I went to the Warren Wilson College. They have an MFA program for writers, and went there and sort of wandered into it without really knowing what it was all about, and was instantly taken. So I earned an MFA degree there. I mostly worked on short stories, which was quite common in graduate school. And so I got out, graduated, and said, by God, I'm going to write a novel now. And so I did, and it wasn't that good. So I sort of lowered my sights and said, maybe I could write the average American novel instead of the great American novel. But I came to understand that writing a novel is a skill that you slowly grow with, that you don't automatically just produce a novel. It takes me draft after draft after draft to get get it where I want it to be. And each novel is different. Each novel is difficult. You don't particularly get better at them, because each novel presents its own sort of technical problems. Cal was a lot of fun to write, Cal Across America, because again, I was going back and forth, cutting between the tall tales and cutting back, and to the sort of very realistic stories of a teenager growing up, and trying to get those stories to talk to each other. And that was the fun part of that book. So I've since written a couple more novels, and I just find it a fascinating form. Novels are so big you can't hold them in your head all at once. So I don't plot them out or outline them or anything. Yale doctor has said, you write a novel like the way you drive cross country at night. With the headlights will show you about 100 yards in advance, 50 yards, and you can drive a long way that way without knowing exactly what's all the way out there 2 or 3 miles down the road. But as you travel, you see more and more and more, and that's the fun part about writing novels.
What advice would you give to other writers who'd like to be published?
Persistence seems to be the only key that I've found with writers. I've seen lots of talented people, far more talented people, say in graduate school and such, and luck does play a great deal in this, unfortunately. But more than anything, persistence, the ability to sit down and keep writing and keep writing and keep writing. Because I'm most days I'm not very inspired. Very, very often I'm not inspired. But I do like sentences and just playing with words and putting them down. And the more you play with them, the more you see patterns. And so I have found that being published is great. Having people read your book is wonderful. Having that sort of connection there. But for me, I found the most rewarding thing though is the writing itself. So I plan to keep doing that.
That's great. Dale, Neal, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.